in the last year, we almost doubled our production, which is pretty amazing. We stayed in the same footprint.
Hey, it's Ari Santiago, President, CEO of IT Direct. Welcome to this episode of Made in America. I'm really excited. We've got a different guest today, Tony Karlowicz from Back East Brewery. I'm really excited to have Tony on to talk about not just beer, everybody's favorite topic, I'm sure, but also his entrepreneurial journey, his view on manufacturing in general, and the brewing landscape in Connecticut and across the United States. Tony, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate having you.
Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
All right. Well, listen, it's the Made in America podcast, so we start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
Beer, and we make it because we love it.
That's the most concise answer to those two questions I've ever got, and one of my favorites. So for those of you that are watching, you can see that Tony came prepared with four different brews. And for those of you watching on TV, you can see that. So just before we get started, we are going to, despite the fact that it's only 11 a.m., we are going to crack these open. It is a Friday. So maybe you could just walk us through really quick, Tony, what are the four beers that you brought, maybe a little bit background on them, and if there's any reason why you brought these four in particular, love to hear it.
Sure. These are four that we happen to have as I was walking out the door this morning, but they are four of our better ones. They're all good, actually, but these are four of our more popular ones, and of course, three of them are IPAs or double IPAs. Right. That's kind of what put us on the map. And then I brought our Czech mix, which is a Czech-style Pilsner. So we're going to hopefully get through all four of these. The double IPAs are a little bit stronger. Both of them are north of 8%. I have Double Scoop, which is a double IPA version of Ice Cream Man, which is our most popular beer. I'm sure I'll talk a little bit more about Ice Cream Man later and how that kind of put us on the map. But after a few years of doing Ice Cream Man, a lot of people asking about a double IPA version of it, we came out with Double Scoop. We've only done it a few times, but it's been very, very popular. And it is kind of, as the name implied, a little bit, sweeter, a lot of kind of juicy citrus flavors. And Citra hops is the main hop in there, which, as the name implies, is very citrusy. So we use a lot of Citra hops. And I'll probably talk a lot about, hops today, because hops are one of the main ingredients in beer. And not only are they the main ingredient in beer, but they're kind of what gives IPAs their profile. And the name of the game today is IPA. So we started off with 7 years ago. We started off with one IPA, and we probably have close to 10 different IPAs now, and probably 9 of those 10 are all in our top 10 list. So
there you go. Cool. Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about that, and we'll definitely want to get into New England IPA, which I think is now like an official style of IPA. So let's get to that. So what else we got here? So we have the Double Scoop. What's this one up here? The Recautra?
Recautra, yes. Another IPA. We'd call it a New England style IPA. And again, kind of the fuller body, a little bit sweeter, a lot of those citrusy and tropical flavors to it. Yep. The name Recautra actually is a combination of the two types of hops we use in there, which is Recau, that's a New Zealand hop, and Citra, which is again one of our favorites.
Right.
And Big Day Off. This is we do some advertising on Radio 104, the alternative radio station, and the Big Day Off. I don't know if you remember this from the 1990s.
I should, but go ahead. Let's test it out.
They did this big festival, and they called it Big Day Off at the what was then called the Meadows Music Theater.
I still call it the Meadows, even though I don't know if it's the Comcast or Xfinity or whatever. But yeah, I still call it the Meadows. So that's why we've got the labels, got kind of the badge, and then the lights in the background and whatever.
Exactly. Yep.
That's cool. Oh, so actually the Big Day Off, and then Back East kind of looks like your backstage pass there.
Right. Exactly.
Nice.
Yep.
Cool.
So this was something we partnered with Holden and Amy on the radio. We went into this whole couple month long process of trying to figure out what beer to brew, and all the listeners had input into it, and coming down with the name of it, and Then we had people vote on the name, and big day off.
Crowdsourcing some beer there.
Exactly.
That's cool. That's cool. I mean, just for anyone who's not seeing it kind of on the video, and I'm not even sure if you could zoom it in on there, but what's kind of neat is as I look at these labels, what it kind of reminds me of is I'm a big LP guy, right? So I bought a record player, really kind of got back into vinyl, which now, as I say that out loud, makes me sound really old. But one of the things I'm noticing here is kind of the really interesting kind of attention you guys have put into the labels, and we'll talk about Chex Mix in a second. But when you look at the labels, I mean, you look at sort of the double scoop, obviously a real homage to ice cream, very simple. The Big Day Off we talked about. The Recoutra has kind of the tree, and then the Chex Mix, which is a really kind of cool play on Chex Mix if you've seen it, but the label kind of written like Czechoslovakia, so it's really cool. So talk to us about Chex Mix and how we got there.
Sure. So it is a Czech style Pilsner.
Okay. That explains the name.
And it's actually it's a mix of a Czech and German style Pilsner. So in Central Europe, Northern Europe, that is kind of the birthplace of Pilsners. And I personally love Pilsners. One of my favorite styles of beer. Again, we do a lot of IPAs because that's really what people are asking for. And as you know, in order to stay in business, you need to have consumers that
want your product.
That want your product.
It's funny, it's something we talk about a lot on the podcast, and I think in business in general. And it's funny, it's just as true for beer as it is for IT services, as it is for manufacturing airplane parts or manufacturing anything else. You got to focus on what the customer wants and give the customer what they want if we want to be around.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what keeps the business sustainable. That's what allows us to have employees who, have jobs they enjoy.
Right.
And but occasionally we like to branch out and do things that we want to do. And,
sure.
Things we enjoy. And we've seen this beer, definitely getting a little bit more popular. And
are Pilsners in general kind of gaining some traction at all in the marketplace? Or?
They are. I think, your traditional, your macro brews, most of those are Pilsners.
Right.
Pabst and Coors Light and Budweiser, those are all Pilsner style beers. They're American adjunct Pilsners, so kind of sort of, a little bit different than your traditional
Chex Mix
German.
Isn't going to taste like a Bud Light.
It's not. No,
okay, yeah.
Nope. It has a little more flavor to it, a little more kind of that maltier depth.
Yep.
Exactly.
All right. Yep. Well, before we get on to my next questions, let's get some beer going.
Sure.
So I'm going to do this Recoutra.
Yes.
Yep. Recoutra. All right. Let's see here. I'm going to open it by the mic so we can really get a nice pop. There we go. That's nice. Let's see if we can. Am I pouring that correctly?
Yes, you are.
All right.
It's going to pour, hazy, cloudy. Most of the New England style IPAs have that orangish color. Looks really pretty, I think.
It does look really pretty. Looks like it's going to taste really pretty too. So let's give that a go right now.
So that one I describe as very tropical
First episode
flavors.
I've ever been able to eat what one of the guests makes, which is it's pretty good. This is delicious, actually. That was really good.
Thank you.
Very good. What are you gonna have?
I think I'll do the same.
All right, get after it.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, let's get into a little bit of your background. So, I think people may or may not be surprised to learn that you're actually an accountant by trade.
Correct.
And that was your original gig. So let me not steal your story. Why don't you kind of share with the audience, how'd you get from bean counting to hop counting, as it were?
Sure. So I grew up in Southington. Yeah. So I'm a local guy. I went to college in Vermont. When I came back to Connecticut in 2000, started off at an accounting firm. One of the big, I think it was Big Five at the time, one of the Big Five accounting firms. Did audit work there, got my CPA license and started working. And a few years later, my daughter was born. And I said, I can't do these crazy hours. It's just not something I saw myself doing.
Lost that. Didn't really have that passion.
No, didn't have the passion for it. Certainly was good experience and, absolutely helped when I started the business. But, it wasn't really something kind of the field I saw myself in. And the hours were crazy. And we had just had our first kid. And I said, I want to look for something else. Ended up taking a job at an insurance company and worked there and, started to get bored with that pretty quickly. And about that same time that I started there in 2006, I got together with my cousin. Mm-hmm. We were first cousins. He grew up in Hartford and moved out to San Diego, lived there for He's a little bit older than me, but I think he moved back east to Connecticut in 2000 or 2001. And shortly after that, we started homebrewing together, I think probably 2004. When I was growing up, my parents owned a candy store in Bloomfield, candy gift store. So from an early age, probably 8 or 9, I saw my parents kind of running their own business.
Sure.
And I just really liked it. I liked the whole retail aspect of it, interacting with customers, and having people come into the store, get candy. Beer's another one of those pleasures, I guess.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
Being able to just see how my parents ran, a small business. And it was something that really had a big impact on me and something I'd always wanted to do. And like I said, after I left the accounting firm, I worked in an insurance company, started planning Back East. Alluded to it before, but the name came from my partner / cousin who has an engineering background. He's a PE or
Right.
public engineer, electrical engineering degree. So he's, kind of is
Back East because he came back east.
He came back
and
east.
started the brewery.
Exactly.
That's exciting.
So he actually started brewing out in San Diego. He was there in the mid 90s when, kind of that, I guess that'd be the second wave of the craft beer movement. The first wave being in the early 1980s. Some of the pioneers, like Fritz Maytag from Anchor Brewing Company and Boston Beer Company.
Sure.
Sam Adams. Sierra Nevada. Ken Grossman from Sierra Nevada.
So funny, man. From a guy myself. I mean, well, you're about the same age, but kind of grew up in the '80s. I didn't, start drinking beer until the '90s.
Yeah.
To me at that point, Sam Adams was obviously a good beer, but it wasn't, not what I think of as craft beer. Like I think of, Back East or New Park Brewing or Two Roads or whatever.
Right.
Which I guess is the second part of the second movement, or is that the third movement?
I think that's kind of the third movement because there was a bunch in the 90s and there was this bubble in the 90s, and I know you want to talk a little bit about, my outlook on the industry and, part of it is understanding where we came from.
Absolutely.
Again, in the 80s, Harpoon was one of the earlier ones. And, you would go into a package store and you might find maybe, 5 or 6 facings. You might be able to find Harpoon Ale. You could probably find a Boston Lager.
Sure.
That's pretty much how it was through the 80s. In the early 90s and the mid 90s, it really started to grow. Stone Brewing Company, Dogfish, some of those ones kind of, I think of that second stage of craft beer. Had a big bubble that burst in the late 90s. And there were a lot of them that closed.
Okay.
A lot of it was quality issues. There were people kind of getting into the industry saying, I want to make beer. There really wasn't the support structure that there is now. Craft beer is, I forget how many, hundreds of millions of dollars it contributes to the economy in Connecticut, but it's a big number.
Well, let's take this opportunity now, since we're on that.
Sure.
You guys were the 7th craft brewer in Connecticut.
Correct.
Is that right? And if my numbers are right, now I think this is a little bit old, but as of the end of last year, we had 70. Is that right?
Yeah, and I actually think the number is north of 100 now. So
it's grown a lot. So,
a lot.
Let's talk about that. Listen, I think everyone looks at their macro industry and tries to figure out what's happening with competition coming in and all that. So what's your take on that? Why do you think it has grown so much? And what do you see as kind of, are we at the point of another bubble bursting pretty soon?
I think the bubble's going to deflate a little bit. I'm not sure if there's going to be a big pop like there was in kind of in the late 90s, but we're already seeing it. I think 2019 there'll be less openings than there were the year before. We're seeing a slowing of the growth rate of opening. In Connecticut specifically, there were some law changes that got put in about I'd say about 7 years ago, right around the time we were opening. There were some law changes that got put in place, which allowed breweries to sell direct to consumers. Before that, it was to sell direct to consumers as far as pints go.
Right.
So before that, you could go to a brewery, and if you came to visit us in 2012 or 2013, we'd give you a few little samples of beer. But a lot of the breweries,
But you couldn't serve like a bar.
Exactly.
You could your DTC capability, your direct to consumer was limited to filling up a growler or maybe selling them some bottles you guys had, but you couldn't actually serve like a tap room like we all think
exactly.
of now.
Exactly. And Two Roads really was the brewery that kind of went to the state and said, hey, look, we're investing like tens of millions of dollars here. And the only way we can make this successful is by actually having, a bar where we can sell beer direct to consumers. And the state said, that is a good idea. And so that kind of helped open the floodgates to a lot of places. So a lot of places you'll go to, they're very small. They may only sell just in their tap room. They may only have a handful of employees, and they're not making beer for distribution. They're just really kind of they're competing with the local bars in their town or their.
Is that just sort of like they probably a couple guys or a guy and a gal or whatever that just kind of like beer, and they're just kind of opening up and hey, this is a way to kind of have a hobby that maybe at least breaks even or pays for the beer or whatever.
Exactly. Yep. And they are really small, and a lot of times it's people who are just see it and maybe we had some part of making it cool. Maybe it wasn't us, maybe it was somebody else, but at some point someone say, hey, this is really cool.
Right.
I can make beer for a living. And there's always that, misconception that, oh, you drink beer all day. That's great. We
Something tells me if you drank beer all day, Tony, you guys wouldn't have had the success that you've had so far.
Yeah, we wouldn't have come as far as we have. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about that actually before we, I know we've been on the industry, but let's talk about kind of the Back East kind of trajectory. Because I know, or based on sort of my little bit of research I did on you guys, that I think, and correct me if my dates are wrong, but I think about 2014, you guys took on, some additional debt to, I believe, double the size of the brewery and whatnot. And maybe at that time, maybe built the tap room. And then I think you and I talked kind of previously, I believe you're going into another kind of investment round and opening. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
Just start how big you were when you started, size of size, maybe, I don't know how you measure. Is it bottles sold or gallons sold, and where you are now and employees? Just I think the audience would be interested to know, what is a brewery? How much are you making out there at Back East, and how do you employ and all that?
So I think in this year, in 2019, we'll end up somewhere around, I think we'll end up somewhere around 6,000 barrels.
Okay.
So we measure
barrels is what you
production
measure by.
Exactly,
okay.
And a barrel is 31 gallons. So
oh wow, that's a lot of beer.
It is.
Right.
Yeah, I can't do the math off the top of my head, but it is a lot. If you think about it, if you think of one of the larger size kegs, that's a half barrel of beer.
It's almost 200,000 gallons. By the way, I think we just discovered.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
so, yeah
it's you did that in your head?
Yeah,
just now. Nice. It sounds more impressive when we say it in gallons.
Yeah, actually, it does. It's very. it was impressive in the barrels, but I had no idea there was so many. Gallons in a barrel.
It's actually, we're making millions and millions of ounces of beer.
We're approaching billions of ounces.
Yeah, billions of ounces.
Right. If we drank beer in shots, it'd be crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
So a half barrel keg is 15.5 gallons. So if you think of 6,000 barrels would be the equivalent of about 12,000 of those kegs. So
right.
We distribute just in Connecticut and Western Mass, 2 counties in Western Mass, basically from Springfield up to Northampton. Mm-hmm. And so it's a lot of beer, and we've grown a lot. I mean, I think the first year we brewed a few hundred barrels, maybe, if that. It was myself and one other employee. Within the first year, my partner Ed came on full time. He handles all the kind of the back of the house, all the production, anything associated with that. And I handle all the front of the house stuff. So managing the tap room, but also just as important, managing the business, managing
going
our
on podcasts.
Relationships, going on podcasts.
There you go.
Yep. It's good to have a partner that is different than you. Mm-hmm. And even though we're cousins, kind of blood, we're also very different. He's definitely an introvert. He likes to be kind of in the background, getting stuff done, which worked out perfectly. Mm-hmm. I think. I don't want to say perfectly, but nothing perfect. But
right.
It's worked out really well over the last 7 years of
So what was your guys' strategy? I mean, it sounds like you kind of went into Back East Brewery. When you started the business, you started it as a business. You didn't start this to just be a hobby.
Right.
And so what's the strategy that you guys have used to gain distribution the way you have across the state and to stand out? Because, it sounds like every year competition's coming in force.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of us have faced, in whatever business we're in, the more competition, the more options. There's, of course, low-cost providers, price pressure, options. What do you guys do to kind of get traction and get that moving?
There is a lot of innovation. You kind of need to be ahead of the curve, so to speak, and I think that really applies to any business. And part of what we do is we try to listen to consumers, and I think a lot of people are so focused on their business and what they're doing that they're not really kind of staying in touch with what people are looking for, what people want, what needs are, where the demand is.
How do you do that?
It's a lot of it's through our employees, through our customers. We interact almost every day with customers, either in our tap room or just being out in the field in the market. We have a sales rep who's on the road, visiting accounts, developing those relationships. So I think part of it is just listening.
Yeah,
really.
It's not, it's funny. We talked about that one of the early episodes with Jason Howie from OK Industries, and he talked a lot about how one of the keys to their success has been engaging with customers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And it's not that difficult, right? It's just get out there, have a conversation with them, hear what they're saying,
right.
See what they're doing, especially right in retail, what's selling, and provide more of that.
Yeah, and another part of it is being unique and being genuine. You know what I mean? Trying to do your own thing, and I think. We all have our role models. When we opened up, I had my role models of, breweries that I admired. And
do you want to share who those were?
Sure. Sam Calgione from Dogfish Head was one. New Belgium was one. These were I think these were like that second wave I was talking about. Like a lot of the ones that opened up in the 90s, they survived the bursting of that bubble. And they went on to grow, really, really large successful businesses. Kim Jordan from New Belgium.
Do you have any mentor-mentee relationships with those folks? Like, is it admire from afar, or you've got some contact and you've been able to bounce ideas?
It's more admire from afar.
Yeah, I do. Trust, I get that.
The industry in Connecticut is pretty tight though, and when we started, I knew every single person in the Connecticut beer industry. I don't now, but
now it sounds, it's like 20 times the size. Let's talk. Something we've talked about recently. We did some episodes at the Aerospace Component Manufacturers Aerospace Alley trade show in Hartford, and we've talked. And we're involved. We had the executive director of the NHMA was on. I'm involved in IMA. So there's a lot of organizations in manufacturing, right? Whether it's in plastics or aerospace or whatever, medical devices, and obviously in brewing too. I know there are those things. Seems like when people work together, we end up getting better than when we compete. So maybe talk a little bit about how the brewers work together, what your relationship is with maybe, Two Roads. What about some of the longer, like City Steam, right? To me is one of the Hookers, another old, I don't know when those even started. They've been around my whole, drinking existence.
Yeah. We actually opened up probably about 6 months before Two Roads. So 2012 was the start of what I call that third phase, at least, kind of in Connecticut.
But City Steam was around from was that second wave? Is that where they?
Yeah,
90s?
I think they early 2000s. Okay, maybe late.
And
90s.
Hooker, I don't even know.
I think 2006.
Okay. Oh, so those are a little bit later.
Yeah. So those were some of the ones I guess you could call them my mentors,
your contemporaries,
or people that we talked to when we were opening up, and it sounds silly, but you knock on their door and say, "Hey, I'm opening up a place across town,"
right.
And Hooker's right across town from us. I have a great relationship with Kurt. And the craft beer we've always been kind of like the underdogs. I think 10 years ago, it might have been like 5% of the market. Yeah. Now it's close to 20%, which is just insane. And when you think of the beer market, it's a huge market.
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions of barrels a year. And for us to come out and do, 5,000 barrels, it's like just a drop in the bucket.
Sure.
But we're making a big dent. And part of it is just kind of the supporting local, realizing that, when you're buying a local product, you're supporting a local business, local families,
sure.
And so
local businesses tend to support the community,
exactly.
Sponsor little league teams, get involved on boards, Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And it makes a big impact.
Yeah.
It really does. And people understand that, and they get behind that. And as long as it's a good product, and again, I think that was part of the problem in the 90s. There were a lot of people just kind of jumping into it and say, "Hey, I can make some money making beer." and the quality wasn't there. And again, I think a big part of that is I can smell that beer.
It's so good, dude. Yeah, man, it's delicious.
Can I take a break?
Please, yeah, absolutely. Get after it. I mean, honestly, this is really good. So talk about the Brewers Association, which I know you're a part of, and how do you guys work together? I mean, it would seem like, right, especially when you're such small businesses, like, that, if you've got the Hooker, which is right around the corner, or, 2 roads right up the road, or whatever, that there'd be some competition and maybe a little bit of not wanting to share.
There is some competition, but at the end of the day, there's probably more collaboration than competition. Again, realizing I'd rather go into a restaurant that has, 8 Connecticut beers on, because I know at least they're supporting local beer, and I'm going to drink that instead of, something else, even if it means, I'm supporting my, my competitor. So there's always been that amount of collaboration, the David versus Goliath, I guess.
Which sort of helps. How do you guys collaborate? Is there meetings? Is there organizations? Talk about how you guys foster that.
So there is the Brewers Association, which is a national organization. They're based in Colorado. But what they also did was they also encouraged all of the states to set up their own Brewers Association. So in 2012, we were one of the breweries that were the founding members of the Connecticut Brewers Guild.
Oh, nice.
And I'm on the board of that now. And that kind of was the local organization, or the local Brewers Association. So like any guild, we've kind of grown and developed over the years, and we're starting to have more of an impact, and just kind of the same way it is with any business. We were talking earlier about when you first start your business, there's things you do, and there's things I did and didn't know, or there's things I did do and other stuff I didn't know about that looking back, and I'm like, boy, why would I ever think that? Like it's just
it's part of the growth, right?
It is, and you get better and more comfortable over time. And that's just part of the natural progression happens for any business, and it's fun.
So how do you you've talked about your distribution in Connecticut and the 2 counties in Mass. I mean, how did you break into distribution? How do you what do you guys do at Back East to stand out and get a following? And I don't know if you even want to start this whole conversation with the initial beer that may put you on the map.
Sure. So the true story of how we got our distribution was when we started planning Back East in 2004, 2005. We started homebrewing together. It didn't have a name. The name didn't come until much later. It's not like we said, hey, let's start Back East Brewery. It's like, well, let's start a brewery. And, the name was one of the things that, happened during that process. And we started brewing together, and it turns out Ed and I are both married. It turns out, my wife was had a student whose mom worked at the time it was called Franklin Distributors in South Windsor. They've since merged with Hartford Distributors, and they go by the name, Hartford Distributors now. But she said, well, maybe I'll talk to, Lily's mom and see if, you can get a meeting at, So we showed up there not knowing anybody there, except her, and sat down with the president and, said, hey, we're going to open a brewery, and we'd like you guys to sell our beer. And
we're going to.
Yeah.
We don't even have a beer for you to taste yet.
Right. Well, we brought in some samples.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Some homebrew samples and stuff. And, that has been, I think it's getting harder and harder to get distribution. Like you've been to package stores. I mean, the shelves are crowded, taps are crowded. I think we started at a great time. If I was looking at if I know what I know now, and I'm looking at the market saying I'm thinking of starting a new brewery, I'm going to just walk away and wait a little bit. I don't think the time is right to do that. I think beer is one of those things that people just get so passionate about, and entrepreneurship they get passionate about too. But I think that kind of sometimes gives you blinders. So you're like, I'm just going to do this because look at they're doing it, and and if they could do it, and maybe people looked at us and said, boy, if these 2 guys can do it, like why can't I?
Could do it, right? Yeah.
Anybody.
Yeah.
We started at the right time, I think. So that's kind of helped with cementing our reputation, and
And so what? So you go to the meeting, you ask for distribution. They say yes right away.
They say, yeah, we'll think about it. Kinda.
That sounds like the classic.
Right.
No. Right. Sure, we'll think about it. We'll call you. Don't call us. Yeah.
I mean, now a lot of the distributors are saying no to a lot of the smaller breweries because there's just so much there, and it from their perspective, the distributors want to focus on brands that are growing, that have the capacity to grow. Right. In the last year, we almost doubled our production, which is pretty amazing. We stayed in the same footprint. Our taproom business has grown substantially. Couple of our distributors are up almost double, and it's really. Do
you guys do anything to kind of push that, right? Because I mean, obviously the tap room is the tap room, and I know you guys do live music and stuff like that. But how do you're not sort of with the distributor in the middle, right? You're not kind of talking to the consumer outside of the tap room. You're not even talking necessarily to the restaurant directly. How do you kind of move the product through the pipeline?
So I mean, we do have a full-time sales rep who spends most of his time on the road.
Okay.
If you see him out on the road, he's 6'10", so you
cannot miss him.
And he's always wearing Back East apparel, so you won't miss him.
It's like a walking billboard.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Say, hi, John. Tony told me to say hi to you. We're out there. I mean, we need to be. He just started in August, so for our first 6.5 years in business, we did not have a single person on the road, and every single drop of beer that we sent to our distributors was, went out into the market and was sold, which is a great thing, but it's not something you can expect to do forever. So we held off on hiring a sales rep until we doubled our production at the end of 2018.
So what that's really interesting, kind of how you're focusing on not relying on just great quality beer, which you guys have, but actually looking at it from the business perspective and kind of building into, say, we got to keep driving that demand, as it were, I guess it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, you have to always be keeping that demand growing. And that's one of the things I'm super proud of that we've done is we've, again, been able to double production without really expanding our geography. In 2019, I think craft beer is going to be up 4%, and that's the lowest growth rate in probably 10 years. A couple of years ago, it was 15%. 1 year was 18%. It was 14%. I mean, you're looking at and eventually, nothing can sustain that growth for forever.
Right.
So eventually, you knew that was going to kind of happen. But when our share of the market is growing, when our segment of the beer, the craft beer segment of the beer market is growing 4%, and we're able to grow 100%.
Yeah, that's pretty solid.
Without expanding, where we distribute.
So so are you looking at expanding where you distribute? Like, is that part of the plan for Back East to look at expanding? I mean, because it just occurred to me as we're talking right now, you're in Connecticut and 2 counties of Western Mass, and one of the things we always hear about, right, talking about Connecticut is, one of our geographic advantages is how close we are to so much of the U.S. population, right? Like 120 million people within an hour's drive, kind of Hartford. So where, are you looking at maybe expanding into kind of the New York metro, Boston metro?
Eventually, we'd like to. That's years down the road. So
what's your strategy? How do you know where to grow? Like, how do you?
Our go deep rather than wide, really. Yep. I mean, is kind of what we're doing, and it takes a lot of investment to add capacity, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we just did that less than a year, or just over a year ago. So we're not going to do that anytime soon. But it does take a lot of, it takes that extra capacity. Just like any manufacturer, you kind of need that capacity. Sometimes it's, more expensive to put in. Sometimes it's less expensive. When it's less expensive, there's lower barriers to entry. So competition is going to be a little tougher. So pick your poison, I guess. But it is a pretty expensive to put in that extra capacity.
So talk about I'm a technology guy, and I know you guys kind of have a state-of-the-art brewing facility. So what does state-of-the-art mean in the brewing world? How much technology is there in brewing these days?
There's a lot of it is automated. There's a lot of automation in there. We just put in a new canning line, and basically the whole process from getting the empty cans off the pallet, all the way to the cans being, rinse, purge, filled, lids put on, cleaned off, blown dry. All that process is automated on the line. We do right now have people, couple guys manually packaging at the end, and a lot of the brewing process is also automated. So it's all happens kind of on a control panel.
No kidding.
And there's actually brew systems out there where you can actually kind of start brewing at home while you're drinking your morning coffee, and do it from an iPad.
No kidding.
That's
some high-tech stuff.
We don't have that, but a lot of it is automated. If you've ever homebrewed before, millions of people have homebrewed before, so you kind of know it's pretty manual process of stirring and mixing and moving grain. But with our brew house and packaging systems, it's a little more automated. So
are you guys kind of thinking about things like all the manufacturers thinking about like supply chain management, throughput, quality, OSHA, like all that stuff, right? Still applies to you guys like it does for everybody else.
Yep, it does. And a lot of that stuff, I handle as kind of like the business side of the partnership. So I've grown my team on the sales and tap room side. Before it was kind of just me doing all that stuff, but now, it's great to have somebody doing social media and the website and, all the marketing and the sales. And, I can kind of focus on things like, supply chain and, and projections and growth. Part of it is, big part of the supply chain but challenges are with sourcing hops.
I was just literally about to ask you about that. Yeah.
That is the challenging one. Although I just saw a couple months ago that hop production has doubled since, and I don't know if it was just in the U.S., but the U.S. is the largest hop growing country, but it has doubled since 2012.
Oh, wow.
So
that's support all those breweries starting up.
Yeah, and that's a good thing.
I've actually heard that Connecticut soil can grow some pretty interesting hops. I don't know if that's a rumor that I heard or something real.
Connecticut was actually known for their hops. So the Hop River and Hop Meadow and a lot of those names you see, they were named after the hops, the plant. Right. And what happened was in the 1910s, there was a big blight, which killed a lot of it, and which killed a lot of those crops, and farmers started planting tobacco instead. Okay.
So you think hops will come back to Connecticut at all? Is there any comeback?
There is some. Actually, right in Windsor, Thrall Malting House. They were actually the first malt house in Connecticut, so they grow malted barley, wheat, oats, all ingredients we use in beer, and they're also growing hops. And there's a few other farms throughout Connecticut that are growing hops as well.
So how'd you guys get known for IPAs? Is it because it's because you liked IPA, Tony? Is that why you made IPAs? Is that why your IPA was so good? Like, how did that get there?
So our first kind of New England style IPA, actually, before I even talk about Rakautra, our first IPA that we brewed was Misty Mountain Ipa. And
is there any chance that was named after the Led Zeppelin song Misty Mountain Hop?
It could have been a big influence. Okay. Yeah, a lot of our stuff is
one of my favorite Zeppelin songs. Yeah. So
a lot of our stuff is music. I'm a big music fan. So a lot of our stuff is music, has kind of musical references to it.
Okay.
So, but when we started, this is how old we are. It was, we were just going to call it IPA. It sounds so silly to say now.
Sounds quaint now.
Yeah,
right?
Back East IPA, as if that's the only IPA Back East is ever going to make. And one of my, kind of somebody I trust, our distributor, I guess you could call him a sort of a mentor who's, kind of helped us over the years, works at Hartford Distributors, and he kind of said, you got to come up with a name. I'm like, why would you come up with a name? Because like there's Harpoon IPA, there's Long Trail Ale, and
right.
Why names are silly. It's your brewery, and then you call it the style of beer that it is. And nowadays, virtually nobody does that. I mean, part of the the marketing is the creativity of having a name. So I said to him, I'm like, boy,
some good names out there too.
There
right?
is, yeah.
Sip of Sunshine's a classic.
Exactly, yeah. And that's you don't call it Lawson's IPA,
right.
You don't call it Treehouse IPA.
No, right.
But so at that time I said, you know what? I always thought, Misty Mountain IPA would be a cool name. And so I'm glad we named that, because if we didn't, when we came out with a second IPA,
it would have been stuck.
It would have been, it would have like
Back East
number
IPA 2. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So,
plus, but Misty Mountain IPA, right, just has for anyone that's like kind of drinking a New England style IPA, right? I mean, it is misty.
Yeah.
And I think it's alliterative, and I don't know if it's maybe just my kind of bent on it, but there's some kind of connection in my mind between sort of like classic rock and brewing and beer
and music. Exactly.
And music and all that. So it kind of connecting all these different things. In hindsight, it seems like a marketing stroke of genius.
Yeah.
That just came out of love.
I think they probably drank some beer. The Led Zeppelin.
I mean, at least some. Yeah.
So and then we came out with Ricautra, which kind of really was our first really delve into the definitely one of the earlier Connecticut kind of hazy New England style beers. This was before anyone called it New England style, but there are obviously some pioneers. The big one being Treehouse in Massachusetts, who kind of was one of the first ones to kind of make that style of beer, which is now the most popular style, at least among craft brewers. So
yeah. And so when did the term New England style IPA come from? I didn't realize till actually quite recently that that's like a thing, like if you're out in California, they'd be like, do you want a New England style IPA? I'm like, is there another style? Like, when you grow up somewhere, right? It's like, growing up, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a lobster besides a Maine lobster. Right. So, yeah.
It was fairly recently where people started calling it that. I think, again, when you create something new that nobody else is doing, you just kind of sometimes don't really know what to call it. And if you look at this beer, if 10 years ago, somebody would have poured you that and they would have said, is that
spoiled
juice? Is it disgusting? Yeah. It looks nasty.
Right. And now it's like a badge of honor,
thing, right?
It's like, well, yeah, look at that's a good looking beer. It's cloudy.
Yeah, it is. That haze is developed from the amount of hops you use in there, so it's a natural part of that. And the yeast, lower flocculating yeast, so you have a lot of that stuff staying up in suspension, and it does impact the kind of the body, the mouthfeel of the beer, and it also, of course, with the large amount of hops that are used, and that does contribute to that flavor. And there's newer varieties of hops. There's North Dakota is one of the big, I think it's North Dakota State University is one of the big, educational institutes that does a lot of research on hops and, supports hop farmers, and as far as things of having healthy yields and innovating and coming up with different, blends of hops and crossbreeding programs. So there's a lot of more variety of hops, and brewers are always more than happy to kind of experiment with that.
So one of the things that people talk a lot about, and one of our focuses has been really the business environment in Connecticut and being supportive of manufacturers. And something you said earlier, kind of in our conversation, alluded to the fact that there was this idea that brewers could really be supported if the state would open up the ability for them to sell beer, DTC, direct to consumer, not just like in bottles, but serve them like at a bar. And you were like, the state said, hey, that's a great idea. So, I mean, what do you think the environment has been like in terms of being supportive of the type of manufacturing that you guys are doing and helping to grow that?
Sure. I mean, I think beer is pretty bipartisan for the most part.
Right.
Most people, enjoy a good beer. And in fact, that's part of the beauty of it, and what we love about it.
I remember the Obama Beer Summit. Do you remember that? The beer summit.
Yeah. You could sit down and have a beer and sit across the table, and at least have something to agree on. And it does tend to bring people together. It is a social thing, and I think I think the state realized that, and I think they realized that when you look at the alcohol market, when you look at the beer market component of it, it's such a huge number. Like I said, I mean, hundreds of millions of barrels of beer a year. And, you look at, Connecticut being able to kind of catch up to the rest of the area. So they I have a favorable outlook and a favorable, opinion of kind of the Connecticut market. We I did go to college in Vermont, and Vermont's a little different. I think they almost tend to have more local pride in things, but I think in Connecticut, I think it's going in that direction. So, it's
been supportive, and because I think there's been, even since you started, there's been at least 2 or 3 that I can think of off the top of my head, like major significant law changes, the being able to sell beer out of there, and a couple other ones that have really gone, I think, to really help. Not necessarily, subsidize, beer brewers, but create an environment where you guys can be successful.
Right, exactly. And a lot of it is, if you go back to, just kind of a general history on beer laws, if you go back to when Prohibition was repealed, the federal government said to all the states, you guys are the ones that are going to get to regulate. It's going to be alcohol is going to be regulated on a state by state basis. So different states have different laws, and Connecticut's always had the blue laws, which go back, I think, a couple hundred years.
Yeah.
And we there are different laws in Connecticut and Massachusetts and Rhode Island and New York. We're so close to those 3 states that you can't help but be impacted by them. If you were in San Francisco, sort of doesn't really matter what Nevada's doing. Right. You know what I mean? Or Washington State. So, but in Connecticut, we do, and we're 10 miles from the border with Massachusetts. So it does have a bigger impact on us, and I think Connecticut has loosened up some of the laws to make it a little bit more kind of competitive with Massachusetts. And I think the big one you're probably thinking of is the direct-to-consumer to-go limits, so what you can sell. Now we can sell 4 cases of beer to consumers. It used to be only 1 case of beer, and there are people who want to buy beer in larger quantities, and if we want to sell them beer and they want to buy beer, if they're having a party, if they're going to share with friends or whatever,
why does any limit make sense? I mean, I don't. No, just curious if there's I don't even get the rationale.
So it goes back to the distributors and the retailers. So if we're selling 4 cases of beer out of our tap room, it's not they aren't buying it from a package store, which kind of goes through the distributor. So that's really where kind of some of the friction is. But gotcha. You could go to Massachusetts and you could go to a brewery and you can buy 10 cases of beer. And there are people who do that. And so that puts us at a competitive disadvantage, because if somebody's saying, hey, I want to buy this amount of beer, I'm going to go to Massachusetts and buy it.
Sort of the irony, right? It's like at Treehouse, right? One of the ways, at least that I've kind of came to know about Treehouse was, people would be like going up there and there's only a limit of what you could buy, and you'd be waiting in line and they wouldn't let you buy it. So it's funny that sort of the shortage mentality, I think, kind of helped build that brand.
Yeah. Yep. Scarcity drives demand. Yep. Sure does. They've grown their capacity, by leaps and bounds. So there's not really a lot of limits anymore. Yeah. But that still hasn't stopped people from, buying a lot of beer there. And, and we've been fortunate that, with this new change in the law that, we frequently do sell, multiple cases to people. And, and I think the distributors realize that, that's part of, helping us to, be able to grow and, be competitive. And, the more business we do, the more we can invest in our people and our communities and, increase our capacity and grow and, all that good stuff where, ultimately all that's, ends up coming back to,
environment overall,
the community and the state.
So when you guys are thinking about investments, and we talked about it right now, right? There's a lot of high tech stuff that goes on in the brewery. You've got the production line, you've got the automated brewing and all that. There's demands and limited resources, like for every business. How do you guys decide, Tony, where to invest and when it's time to redouble down?
It's a good question. I mean, we're very cautious. We're very, I don't want to say slow, because that kind of has a negative connotation. We are innovative, and we are, small enough where we can, be quick to adapt to changes in the market and do things to, keep, our position where we are. But I do think that, we spend a lot of time thinking about, the right way to do things and, kind of what makes sense. And, we have 14 employees now, and, there's a handful of us that are kind of involved in most of the decisions into, in addition to Ed and myself. Mm-hmm. So I think a big part of it is, just stopping to think.
Being deliberative about it?
Yeah.
So you talked about innovation a couple of times, and I meant to ask you about it, and so I'll take the opportunity right now. When you say you innovate, how do you innovate? When do you guys go, hey, you know what, it's time to come up with another brew, and this is the kind of brew I want to make or whatever.
Right. So I mean, there's over 100 different styles of beer, and obviously, Pilsner's the big style,
Yep.
Worldwide with, Bud Light and, Budweiser and Coors. Those are all Pilsner style beers. We should try our Pilsner here soon.
Okay. All right.
Those are all Pilsner style beers. Obviously in the craft beer world, IPAs are the biggest things, but there's a lot of other great stuff out there. And so knowing when to put that out and, knowing kind of what people are going to be doing and, again, pushing the boundaries a little bit. Rakautra was, I think, one of the first Connecticut beers to kind of be one of those hazy IPAs. Certainly not going to say we invented the style because we didn't.
Right.
But we were one of the earlier ones in Connecticut to kind of figure out how to brew it.
Right.
Because it really isn't.
I'm gonna pull off one of these checks. We're running out of time here, so I'm gonna. If we want to try a Pilsner, I'm gonna try that Pilsner.
Check mix Pilsner if you want to crack that open.
I am. Let me do it right by the. Oh, that got in my face. That's all right. That's all right. I'm good. I've had beer splashed in my face before. Good.
Sorry about that.
No.
I did not intentionally drop them on the way in, but maybe.
Well, I don't know if the camera got it, but I was like trying to get it out from the 6-pack without knocking the big day off the top. I should have just moved it. See, I should have done what you just did. Instead, I shook it up on myself. So, yeah.
I'm going to crack this open here. So
just real quickly, you could see, it's way less cloudy, right? Like, I mean,
correct.
A nice amber color to it, but you can see right through it.
Yeah, and that's how Pilsners should be.
Yep.
I was saying before, the cloudy New England style IPAs, that haziness is part of the process of brewing that beer. There's a reason it looks like that,
right?
And it's gone from being entirely unacceptable to being
preferred
status symbol.
Yeah, that's right.
But there's still some beers that should look nice and bright and clear and pretty, like the Czech Mix Pilsner, which is a Czech Republic is a very well known for their beer. Pilsner Urquell and kind of traditional Pilsner styles originated in that area of Northern Europe. And it's a style of beer I love.
Sure.
And
it's easy drinking, right? 4.9 ABV, which is, kind of nice. Yeah,
exactly.
And the smell is very familiar.
Yes.
It's
no offensive flavors.
We're gonna have to make a note to get more breweries on this show or have you back again. It's a fun way to start my Friday. Go ahead.
and I hopefully I brought enough beer for the weekend.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make it out of here. I saw a bunch of people talking about you. I got a few IMs when you were just walking through the office.
Oh, really?
Like, are the beer guys here? Question mark. So hey, so I mean, have any of your beers? I mean, we talked about these IPAs and these Pilsners. Do you guys ever get into like ratings, or anyone's ever kind of I know you talked about status symbol. Yeah. I mean, does anyone ever look at Connecticut or the U.S. and say, hey, rate these craft beers? How does that work?
So Connecticut beer has really come a long way in the last 7 years. We've gone from, having just a handful of breweries that kind of, were really local to, having a lot of well-respected breweries. Mm-hmm. We've had, a lot of our beers have had quite a bit of recognition. Probably the proudest I am is of our porter, which is an English style brown porter. One of the first beers we brewed. In fact, I think our second batch, it won a gold medal in the Great International Beer Festival.
Really?
And then more recently, it's won 2 years in a row at the Great American Beer Festival.
You do realize you did not bring the porter to me.
I did not. No, I did not. It is a widely distributed beer. It's not, I tried to bring the stuff that's a little harder to get, right? That scarcity kind of drives demand type of a thing. So our IPAs, fortunately, when we brew them, whether we're selling them at our brewery or whether we're sending them out, to stores, they do tend to go pretty quick, which is great because you want to drink IPAs fresh.
Do you?
Always remember that. Yeah. Yep.
So well, first of all, have your IPA, so you mentioned your porter got some recognition.
Yes. Yep.
Have your IPAs gotten some recognition? Because it sounds like that was really what got you on the map initially.
It is. IPAs definitely are what got us on the map. A couple of years ago, Draft Magazine did a tasting of close to 400 different beers, IPAs, and they came up with a top 50 list of top 50 IPAs in America. And we were the only brewery that actually had more than one beer on that list.
No kidding.
And we had three.
Three
on the list.
The top 50?
Yep. And Rakautra was one of them.
Almost 10% of your of the list was Back East beer.
Yeah. And you know what? And the thing is, those were the only 3 beers we sent. So we had, I think in the write-up, they ended up saying that That's like batting 1,000 in baseball. So we had Ricautra, which came.
That was in what? Would you say what magazine was that in?
Draft Magazine.
Draft Magazine.
Yep.
Maybe maybe we can find it. We'll link that article in the podcast
Awesome.
notes so people can read that.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was Ricautra was number 21, I believe. Intergalactic Lupulinary, which you may recognize where that name came from.
Yeah. Is that a Beastie Boys?
It is. Yep. Lupulinary is a word I made up.
Yeah.
But intergalactic
I got
lupulinary.
that. Yeah.
Lupulin is the oils and the hops. But anyway, I thought it was a clever name, and
It's a very clever name.
that's another hazy IPA. It's actually a little bit lighter.
What I actually love the most about this, and this is just a personal point for me, is I have a very, very, very eclectic music taste.
I do as well.
I was going to say, and I think that's apparently something we have in common because, you could, if you look at kind of like the last 100 songs I've listened to, it'll be everything from like Fish or Grateful Dead to like Jay-Z, and probably some country mixed in. I mean, it's pretty wild.
I should have brought Susie Greenberg.
Yo, I love that.
That is a mango IPA.
I'm going on the 28th of December to a MSG run.
Oh, awesome.
It's going to be like my 78th show, I think.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a
I'm
big show.
somewhere around in the 30s.
Okay.
But, I will be there on the 29th, Sunday show.
Oh, there you go.
Never want to miss a Sunday
I
show.
know. Well, listen, man, I got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Right,
It's coming up on New Year's, so I'm missing a Sunday show. That's cool.
Ricautra, I was 21 on that top 50 list.
I've had the Susie Greenberg.
You have? Yeah.
Yeah, but just like hitting me right
yeah.
now. Well, you said the name, and if I see a beer called Susie Greenberg, it's
buying it.
yeah, exactly. You what you need to make is got to do a takeoff of a picture of nectar. I feel like would be a nice, picture of Hopter. I don't know, something.
Yeah, we thought of that because a lot of times there are IPAs that use the term nectar because it's kind of that sweetness.
Sure. And with the cloudy IPA, it can kind of look a little nectary, and
orange
you know
juice,
what I mean. And they're a Vermont band, so you got to pull that.
Right,
you got to bring it down. Bring it down here.
I did actually think of that. I did think that would be a clever name with the same kind of album artwork of of that album.
Oh, and that artwork's actually really solid. You could, if you sort of change that front LP cover, instead of being kind of that I think it's a tangerine or an orange.
Yeah.
If you change that to a hop with the same lighting, and wrap it around the can, that's free. That's free.
And not to get all sidetracked on Fish, but
I'm okay with getting sidetracked on Fish for a little bit. Go ahead.
Well.
Yeah.
So you'll probably appreciate that. There's mango.
Yes.
In that beer.
Oh, beautiful.
So as soon as we said mango IPA after mango song, the first thing I thought of was Susie Greenberg.
So let me ask you a question. When was your first Fish show?
1995 or 1996, New Haven Coliseum.
All right. Yeah. So, life is not, well, I was going to say this isn't a competition, or maybe it is because life's a competition, but 1991, I believe, or 92, University of Hartford gymnasium.
Oh, yes.
General admission. It was like, going to a high school band, you know, we just like walked into this gym and you just, walked up to the front. I was like, who are these people? And then I was hooked. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, they actually played at my college, St. Michael's College in Vermont, right outside of Burlington. That was their spring concert in, I think, 93 or 94, which was just like a couple years. I missed it by a couple of years.
Oh, wow.
But otherwise, I would have been at that show.
Pretty sweet.
Pretty cool they play there. So I have that the whole set list from there.
Oh, that's pretty great. Now I'm just about to ask you a bunch of questions about music, so we probably should move on from there. I'll be there. What's it like from a culture perspective, like being an employee at Back East Brewery? What's that like? I imagine it's not beer shotguns and keg stands all day.
No, it isn't. We need to be professional.
Of course.
You know what I mean? We've had over 7 years in business, we've had employees come and go. We've got a great crew right now. You need to be good at what you do. You need to, be professional. You need to get shit done.
Yep.
That's, part of our culture there. And we've got great people that, are good at what they do and get stuff done. And we try to
you don't double in business by not being professional, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. And and that affects the culture, that affects the morale. We still have a good time. You know what I mean? We're still, but at the end of the day, it is a business, and you do need to, kind of do.
Do you guys have like KPI, like traditional kind of business, like metrics, KPIs, sales target? I don't know, but I'd imagine just especially with your accounting and business background, you guys kind of run it.
Yeah. Right? We're not, as you would imagine from that whole conversation on fish, we're not very corporate.
Yeah.
But I am the numbers guy. I kind of look at that stuff. I know all that stuff intimately, and I know when we're doing well and when we're not. I look at data from our distribution, and the phrase we use in the beer world is depletions, and those are actually sales of our beer by our distributor to stores. Mm-hmm. So how
sell through, basically,
exactly how your beer is depleting, how it's if stores are not ordering it, that means they either have it in stock or people aren't asking for it. So I look at all that stuff intimately, so I kind of know all that data. But as we grow and add more employees, and we do want to do that. Right now, we just finished a big expansion at the end of 2018.
How big?
About $750 about $750,000, but it allowed us to double our capacity from about, I think probably about 3,500 barrels to 7,000, 8,000, somewhere around there. And I think this year we'll do about 6,000.
That's crazy, right? Because I think the big investment you did before that, if I remember the article, was like 325,000.
It was much smaller. Yeah.
So but I'm saying,
it was doubling at the time.
Doubling at the double. No, yeah, just double the double. Yeah. It's double the money, So that's exciting. That's exciting. But as a business owner, a little nerve wracking.
It is a little nerve wracking, and we're actually undertaking a big project now, and we're hoping in April of 2020 we'll be opening a new tap room in our same building. So we're finally taking the last bay of our building. It's another 5,000 square feet, and it's going to be completely dedicated to a tap room. We're going to be extending our hours. Right now, we're only open 3 days a week. But there's kind of been that demand for it. And when we opened up our brewery in 2012, there were no tap rooms in Connecticut. No brewery tap rooms. None. Hooker had the closest thing. They kind of had an open house, and so but again, at the time, the state laws didn't allow us to sell pints like a bar would.
Right.
So again, when that law changed, it kind of opened the floodgates for people to open breweries, because now you had this opportunity, this new additional revenue stream that didn't exist before, that made it more sense to open up a brewery. So. Our tap room, if for those of you who've been there, it's the new one's going to be awesome. The current one, it was a 2012 tap room. It's got office ceilings,
Oh, wow.
It really just, doesn't really look like a tap room. And what's happened as another 100 breweries opened up in Connecticut over the last, 7 years, that people have really invested in their tap room and made it a destination.
I would tell you, I've been to some. The NHMA does a lot of events. The holiday party was at a tap room. The meeting before that was at a tap room. I think we were down in Brantford. There's one, I don't remember, another one sort of maybe just down 95 towards Bridgeport. Maybe it was even in Bridgeport. It was, they're wicked nice.
Yeah. And kind
of funky, pretty neat stuff.
Right. Making it a fun place to go.
Destination.
Yeah, exactly. A destination. Now we have a great tap room. We're busy. We've got great beer. We've got great people. Customers love that experience. But this kind of new places, that we're
taking it to the next level.
Exactly.
That's what we've all got to do to move it forward. And so I want to kind of move on to our rapid fire round of questions. We'll kind of start to wrap it up. But I just want to kind of get your take on the outlook of brewing, maybe kind of the space that you're in. Craft brews. What do you see happening over the next few, say, 3 to 5 years? What's your view on that?
Sure. So I think we're going to see and we've already started seeing it. We're going to see a slowing down of brewery openings. Again, most of the breweries that opened up in the last 5 years, I would even venture to guess, 90% or of those that open up in the last 5 years are very small, localized neighborhood tap rooms, and there's still even some saturation in there. There's not a lot of room for a lot of the more bigger breweries our size, or even bigger if you look to somebody the size of Two Roads. Mm-hmm. You can't pull off that model. Now they've done a great job of it. very experienced management team there, the founders there, but being able to pull it off and repeat that, the market's just not big enough to handle that much, more beer going into it. So I see, I definitely see a slowing down of the opening. I see a lot of, closings, and there already have been. So I think that's going to ramp up a little bit, and I've already seen just yesterday a brewery in Rhode Island is, closing or selling. We'll see.
You feel confident about the future of Back East?
I do actually. Yeah, we've got a great team in place. We've developed a great reputation. We've got a great quality product.
You're investing, so investment shows confidence.
Right, we are. Yep.
So let me ask you just more of a personal question. Obviously, kind of the 9 to 5 working for somebody else, accounting, insurance world wasn't for you.
Right.
What drove you? What gave you the confidence to chase your dream and really, get after it? It's a capital intensive, high risk endeavor to start your business. What gave you the confidence to do that?
It was just a lot of planning. It was just a lot of getting ourselves ready to do it. I still remember that point in time where my partner and I were like, all right, well, this is the shit or get off the pot moment. And, you kind of always end up doubting yourself and questioning, do I have the experience? Do I have the knowledge? Am I going to be able to know what I'm doing? And then you sort of think back and you think about, boy, Steve Jobs, starting in a garage, you know what I mean? Going to, a meeting and everybody looking at the product and saying that's a piece of shit. And why would anybody want that? And, all businesses started off as just, people in their garage, you know what I mean? And I think that kind of gave us some confidence to say, hey, yeah, you know what? We're not experts in the field, but everybody starts somewhere. So, that, and just again, saying, hey, are we going to do it or not? Because, and another thing, I remember talking about a lot when we were starting it was, just kind of the only thing I used to say, the only thing I fear more than failing is like not trying.
Yeah.
Is that regret of saying, boy, what if we did that? We could have tried that. So that was a big thing for us. And, you start a business and it fails. Well, you pick yourself up, you dust off your pants and, you say, hey, I'm going to go, try something else. And that's part of what makes America great. And that's part of what, allows all these businesses to succeed and grow. And, just, the entrepreneurial world is very exciting, as you know.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. That's great. That's a great place to leave it. Yeah. Tony, really, that was awesome. I really appreciate it. We're going to go to a rapid fire round. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right, here we go. Ready? Red Sox or Yankees?
Yankees.
Oh, Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts?
I could tell by looking at your wall I was going to get that.
Yeah. Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts?
Dunkin' Donuts.
Staycation or exotic destination?
Staycation.
Sports car or SUV?
SUV. I have a Jeep out the side.
There you go. iPhone.
My dream car.
iPhone or Android?
Android.
If you could do anything, but it would have to be something other than what you're doing right now, what would you do?
Gotta think about that. I like doing something. I like doing stuff with my hands, some stuff physical. Now, I said most of what I do now is sit at a desk, even though I tried to get away from that. Still needs to be done, but doing something outside, doing something outdoors, or
something like that. Do you have a favorite business book?
I do. There's I forget the name of it, but it was written by Sam Calgione from Dogfish Head. Mm-hmm. Read that early on, kind of when we were planning our business, and it really inspired me. Just his outlook on, building a genuine business, building, something that's positive that, has a positive impact on, not just your employees and your bottom line, but, on the community.
That's exciting. I'm going to look up the name of that book. What's one thing you learned early in your career, Tony, or early in your life that you think's helped propelled you to where you are today?
I think it's, being able to, being able to learn, realizing that it's not just it's kind of a destination. What's that
Success
phrase?
is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's really part of it is just kind of getting to where you are and, going along those steps and realizing as you're doing something, I think I did I've done a few podcasts before and you've done many, but if you think back to like the first time you did it, you're like, boy, probably sounded really stupid and maybe I still do, but at least I feel a little more comfortable about what I'm doing. So it's that kind of, journey of learning and getting better and getting more confident in yourself and comfortable with yourself.
What's one thing that you've learned later in your career or later in your life, Tony, that you wish you could kind of go back to young Anthony and tell him that he'd listen to and really make an impact?
Don't harp too much on the mistakes you make. You're going to spend more time, think of those as learning experiences. You screw up, and we've all screwed up, and it's learning from those and figuring out how to get beyond those, I think.
It's important. Yeah, that's great, man. I really, I super appreciate that. Listen, if people wanted to connect with you, Tony, and learn more about Back East, book the tap room, come see the facility, how do they get in touch with you? What's the best way to do that?
Our website, or give us a call. We're 860-242-1793. Visit our website, backeastbrewing.com. Of course, we're on social media. Social media is what has made so many small businesses given us the opportunity to grow. So
Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. You guys on TikTok yet?
No.
TikTok?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, you got to get on. You got to get on the TikTok, Tony. There you go. So that'll be a good idea. That's awesome. We're gonna link you up in the podcast notes. We'll try and put the IG feed and the Facebook and all that. Certainly the website and the phone number and all that. We'll put that up on there for you. So anyone's interested, whether you're on YouTube or podcast, check the notes and you'll have all the information.
And the best thing is to come visit us. We're on Blue Hills Avenue in Bloomfield. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You can't taste the beer through Instagram.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
You can see it, admire it, and say, "Boy, this looks nice." But
you got to get out to Blue Hills. But you guys also have distribution, right? So you're in package stores.
We do.
Restaurants,
grocery
everywhere.
stores. Yep.
Oh, really? All over. Yep. There you go. So look for Back East Brewery at your local pub, Whole Foods, supermarket, whatever. Right. So cool. Listen. So let me do one last question. We talked about a lot today, and what I'd like to do is one of the goals of the podcast is to help people learn through experience shared. So maybe of all the stuff we talked about today, what's maybe one piece of information, one lesson that you think other business owners or business leaders or aspiring entrepreneurs could take away from what we've talked about in your experience that would really help them kind of moving forward?
Sure. I think have confidence in yourself. Know what you're doing. I don't know if I should say this, but my license plate is brew it. So it's just kind of, a spin on, Nike's slogan, but have confidence in yourself. You know what I mean? Know that, with the right amount of preparation that, you could really, do anything. And, don't let anything hold you back.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. That's the entrepreneur's credo right there.
It is.
It's something between just do it and get it done. I think from my standpoint, kind of the takeaway, and I'm not sure if it's something that we specifically talked about or just was an ethos of something that came up throughout the whole conversation. But I think, it was to me, you were doing something that was a living and would put food on the table. Mm-hmm. You could have been an accountant your whole life and raised a family and done all that and been, I think, successful, air quotes, whatever that means. But you realized you wanted to follow your passion. And you followed your passion, you went after it, and you're deploying all the right business strategies, innovation, focusing on the customer. A lot of people say real estate, location. Yeah. I say business is customer.
Absolutely.
And I think your willingness to listen to the customer, do what the customer needs, and follow your passion. That's just re-inspires me as an entrepreneur and a business owner. And I really appreciate you sharing that with the audience, and I hope they take that away.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. And this is
This was,
Great.
yeah, man, this was awesome.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming
Are we
on.
gonna finish all these
I
beers?
appreciate. Yeah. We're not on camera, but we're gonna get after it. A big day off and the double scoop. We're gonna be all over that stuff right now, and I'm gonna make you bring me back a porter at some point in the near future. Well, thanks again, Tony. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ari.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by IT Direct.
As always, thanks so much for tuning in. I definitely want your feedback and hope you subscribe. But what I want the most is to build a community where we learn and grow with each other. I hope you're getting a lot of value out of the time we're spending together. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next time.